At 19, I had 3 best friends: pizza, fried chicken, and the blackout curtains I kept closed all day. None of them talked, which was probably why we got along so well. That afternoon, I was halfway through a cold slice and rewatching a sitcom I could quote better than my own life when Mom called from downstairs, "Sammy, John's back." The pizza slipped from my hand and landed cheese-side down on my comforter, because apparently the universe believed subtlety was for cowards. I stared at the bedroom door. For years ago, John had stood at the curb with a duffel bag over one shoulder, ruffled my hair, and promised, "When I come back, I want to see how much you've grown." Technically, I had grown, mostly sideways. I crossed the room and pulled one curtain open just enough to look outside. John stood across the street beside a dark pickup, taller than I remembered, broad through the shoulders. His posture so straight it made every mailbox on the block look lazy. His sandy brown hair was shorter, his jaw sharper, but he still lifted his face toward my window like he knew exactly where to find me. I dropped the curtain. Absolutely not. Back then, John's parents had divorced, remarried with alarming efficiency, and left him their house like real estate could apologize for abandonment. One night, when I was 15, we had sat on his front steps eating convenience store ice cream while he stared through the empty windows behind us. "Owning a house doesn't make it home," he'd murmured. "Not if nobody inside ever says your name." A month later, he sold it and enlisted. I had wanted to tell him I loved him before he left. I had rehearsed it at least 50 times, but I was 15 and terrified that one wrong sentence might turn 4 years into forever. So I hugged him, swallowed the truth, and promised I would be fine. I had not been fine. Now footsteps moved across the living room downstairs, followed by my father's laugh and Mom's voice, rising with the kind of excitement usually reserved for lottery winners and returning astronauts. Then the stairs creaked. I locked my bedroom door and backed away from it. There were several reasonable options available to me. Fake sleep, fake illness, fake my death. I was leaning toward death when 3 soft knocks landed against the wood. "Sammy?" John's voice had changed, deeper, rougher around the edges, still unfairly familiar. I held my breath. "I know you're in there." Silence seemed like my strongest defense until he added, "There's pizza in the kitchen. You've never abandoned pizza in your life." I glanced at the slice melting into my blanket and felt personally betrayed by my own reputation. "Go away," I managed, though it came out quieter than intended. The floor creaked outside, then something heavy settled against the door. John had sat down. "Okay." I frowned. "Okay. I'll wait." I pressed both hands to my face. "You can't stay there forever." His quiet laugh reached me through the wood, warm enough to stir something I had spent a year burying. "I spent 4 years getting back here, Sammy. I can spare 1 day waiting for you to open a door." My hand moved toward the lock before I could stop it. My fingers closed around the lock, then stopped. Opening the door meant letting John see what 4 years had done to me, and I wasn't sure I could survive the first flicker of surprise in his eyes. So I left him sitting there. 10 minutes passed, then 20. John didn't knock again. Instead, he started talking through the door like we were back on his front steps. He told me about a guy in basic training who fell asleep standing up, a cook who somehow burned chili, and the time his entire unit mocked him for keeping an ugly braided bracelet in his footlocker. My bracelet. The one I had made at 15 with blue cord and uneven knots because I had no useful skills and too many feelings. "You still have it?" My voice escaped before I could stop it. John went quiet for half a second. "Yeah." "Why?" "Because you gave it to me." Like that explained everything. Maybe it did. I sat on the floor with my back against the door, close enough to hear his breathing on the other side. He never asked why I had disappeared from everyone. He never mentioned my weight. He just kept talking until the pressure in my chest loosened enough for me to breathe. Eventually, I stood and turned the lock. I opened the door 3 inches. John looked up from the hallway floor. His face had changed, older, sharper, a faint scar near his eyebrow, but his eyes were exactly the same. Hazel, steady, impossible to lie to. He rose slowly, giving me room. His gaze moved over me once, not lingering, not flinching. Hey, Sammy. That was it. No forced smile. No claim that I looked great. Just my name, spoken like he was relieved it still belonged to someone. My throat closed. I'm sorry. The words came out cracked. For what? For this. I gestured at myself, my room, the boxes stacked near the trash. For becoming... I couldn't finish. John's jaw tightened, but not with disgust. Becoming what? A joke. Once I started, everything spilled out. The humiliation after graduation, the messages that followed, and the months I had spent hiding from everyone. I told him I had tried to move forward with my life, only to end up more ashamed and isolated than before. I told him the rejection wasn't the whole reason I fell apart, only the final shove after years of feeling left behind. Eating made my head quiet, I whispered. So I kept doing it. John's eyes shone, but he didn't interrupt. When I finally ran out of words, he opened his arms slightly. Can I hug you? That nearly broke me more than anything else. I nodded. The moment his arms closed around me, I buried my face against his chest and cried like I was 15 again. John held on, one hand firm between my shoulders. Then I felt it, a tremor running through him. He had come home looking unshakable, and somehow he was shaking too. It's okay, he murmured against my hair. I'm here now. After a while, he leaned back and glanced at the disaster behind me. Are you living in this room or preparing for the apocalypse? I wiped my face. Don't judge my survival strategy. His mouth twitched. Tomorrow morning, 10-minute walk. No, John sat back down outside my door. Then I'll stay here. I stared at him. 9 or 10? 9. You're already becoming a problem. At 8:58 the next morning, I was still under my blanket, pretending unconsciousness was a legally binding excuse. At exactly 9, John knocked once. I made the mistake of mumbling, "Come in." And 2 seconds later, my curtains flew open. Sunlight hit my face with the aggression of a police raid. You're a terrible person, I groaned. John stood beside the window in a gray t-shirt and black athletic shorts, looking far too awake for someone who had spent 4 years voluntarily waking before sunrise. Shoes. I'm emotionally unavailable for shoes. Then be emotionally unavailable outside. 10 minutes later, I was on the sidewalk in my largest hoodie, staring at the ground like eye contact with civilization might be fatal. John didn't walk ahead of me or slow down in that exaggerated way people use when they want you to notice they're being considerate. He stayed beside me, matching my pace without making it obvious. We reached the corner before my lungs filed a formal complaint. By the next block, my calves burned and sweat gathered under my collar. A woman pushing a stroller glanced our way, and every old instinct in me screamed that she was judging me. I stopped. I'm done. John looked at my face, not the distance behind us. Dizzy. No, chest pain. No, then sit. He guided me toward a bench and waited until I lowered myself onto it. I braced for disappointment. Instead, he checked his watch. 4 minutes and 40 seconds. I stared at him. That's bad. It's a starting point. John crouched in front of me, his expression calm. Yesterday, you wouldn't leave your room. Today, you made it 2 blocks. Something in my chest loosened, which was inconvenient because I had been prepared to hate him. Today's goal wasn't distance, he added. It was getting out the door. While I caught my breath, John told me what he had actually done in the army. During his first year, he had been one of the strongest recruits in his training cycle. By his second year, other soldiers had started asking him for help with pacing and form. In his third year, his command assigned him to assist with small group physical training sessions. Later, his unit sent him through additional fitness leadership training focused on conditioning, injury prevention, and recovery. So you're officially qualified to torture people? I wiped my forehead with my sleeve. Qualified to stop them from torturing themselves. His eyes settled on me. I can help with movement. I can build a safe plan. But I'm not a doctor, Sammy, and I'm not pretending exercise fixes depression. I looked away. Mom already mentioned therapy. Would you go if I came with you the first time? That made it harder to say no. Maybe. I'll take maybe. On the walk back, my shoe caught the edge of a cracked sidewalk. I pitched forward, and John's hand closed around my waist before gravity could finish humiliating me. My palm landed against his chest. Solid, warm, annoyingly close. "You steady?" His voice dropped. "Yeah." I wasn't. Not in any useful sense. Back home, John leaned a dry erase board against the wall and wrote, "First goal. 10 minutes outside." Beneath it, he added, "Long-term goal. TOB decided with a doctor." I stared at the board. "That's disappointingly responsible." John capped the marker. "You're welcome." At my medical appointment later that week, the doctor reviewed my blood work, joint health, sleep, and eating habits before helping me set a gradual target of about 65 pounds. John listened, took notes, and didn't interrupt once. That was how I knew the army had taught him discipline. When we got home, he added the number to the board. Underneath, he wrote, "Mystery reward." I narrowed my eyes. "Is it food?" "No." "Then your motivational strategy still needs work." The smallest smile touched his mouth. "You'll care when you earn it." By the end of the week, John had turned our dining room into something between a beginner's gym and a hostage negotiation site. Resistance bands hung over a chair, a yoga mat lived beside the couch, and the dry erase board now contained enough checkmarks to make my mother emotional. That was how Mom ended up cornering John over breakfast. "You should stay here," she announced, sliding a plate of eggs toward him. John nearly choked on his coffee. "Mrs. Carter, Linda." Mom pointed her fork at him, then her expression softened. "And before you argue, I know you don't owe us anything. You've already done more for Sam this week than we knew how to ask for." I stared at my plate, suddenly very interested in a piece of toast. Mom continued, quieter now. "You got him out of that room. You got him to laugh at breakfast. I haven't seen either of those things in a long time, and I'm grateful." John looked uncomfortable in the specific way he always did when someone thanked him. "I'm just trying to help." "I know." Mom reached across the table and briefly touched his wrist. "But you're also trying to figure out what comes next for you. The guest room is empty. You can stay while you get settled. No pressure, and no expectation that you become responsible for Sam." Dad lowered his newspaper. "You still haven't found a place yet, right?" John glanced at me, clearly searching for help. I offered the opposite. "If you leave, I quit." His eyebrows rose. "That's blackmail." "It's emotional communication." "It's definitely blackmail." Mom gave me a warning look. "And John's housing situation is not allowed to become your treatment plan." I lifted both hands. "Fine. I'll continue under protest." Only then did she hide a satisfied smile behind her coffee. "A few weeks," John finally agreed, "until I find my own place." "Of course," Mom replied with the calm confidence of a woman who had already decided the guest room belonged to him. "Great," I answered before anyone else could. "Welcome home." The words slipped out too easily. John's expression softened for half a second. Then he looked down at his plate. By noon, his duffel bag was in the guest room, and he was standing in front of me with a notebook like a man preparing military law. "Ground rules." I dropped onto the couch. "I already regret letting you live here." "You didn't let me. Your mother did." He raised one finger. "No starving yourself." A second. "No crash diets." The third. "No using exercise as punishment." A fourth. "You tell me if something hurts, and you tell your therapist if things get worse." Then his eyes sharpened. "And you stop calling yourself useless." I looked away. "That one seems subjective." "It isn't." His voice stayed quiet, which somehow made it harder to argue. "My rules," I countered. "You don't throw away pizza. You don't wake me before 8. And you don't wear those tight tank tops in the kitchen without warning." John blinked. "Why?" "Psychological safety." The next few days were humiliating in several educational ways. I attempted chair squats and sat down permanently. John replaced my soda with flavored sparkling water, which tasted like television static wearing fruit perfume. I ordered fried chicken in secret, only for the delivery driver to hand it directly to John at the front door. He held the bag up between two fingers. "Anything you want to tell me?" That delivery apps have become dangerously disloyal. He didn't ban the food. That was the annoying part. He divided it, added vegetables, and made me eat at the table instead of alone upstairs. Before every exercise, he explained what we were doing. Before adjusting my form, he always paused. "Can I put my hand on your shoulder? Can I check your lower back?" Nobody had ever made such ordinary questions feel important. By Friday night, my legs ached and my pride had suffered multiple casualties. I went downstairs for water and found John asleep on the couch, one arm over his stomach. An old photograph rested against his chest, him at 18, me at 15, both of us squinting into summer sunlight. I pulled the throw blanket over him. His hand shot out and caught my wrist. My heart attempted desertion. John opened one eye. "I knew you were awake. I was checking for signs of life." His thumb shifted against my pulse. Still alive. His gaze held mine in the dark. Still here. I should have pulled away. Instead, I stood there wondering when getting better had become the second most dangerous thing happening to me. 2 weeks later, the scale showed I had lost 4 pounds. Mom reacted like I had been drafted into the Olympics. Dad took a picture of the number until I threatened to throw the scale out the window. John only nodded once, but the corner of his mouth lifted. "Good work." 2 words. Completely unfair effect. That night, he handed me a black notebook. "Track your weight, sleep, mood, meals, and one thing you're proud of each day." I flipped through the blank pages. "Can survived your workout count every day? No. Then this system is biased." I took it upstairs anyway and wrote across the first page. My 65-pound journey to become someone he could love. It was dramatic, embarrassing, and unfortunately accurate. The entries got worse from there. Day 1, walking remains a hate crime. Day 4, still hate walking. Day 8, John wore a fitted shirt. I completed 2 extra laps for public health reasons. Day 12, down 4 pounds. Still in love with John. Condition appears chronic. I kept the notebook hidden under my mattress because dignity was fragile and John had already destroyed most of mine with resistance bands. After one particularly sweaty workout, I peeled my shirt over my head in the living room and waited for some kind of reaction. John kept coiling a band like a man who had spent 4 years around half-dressed soldiers and had no reason to be impressed by me. I hated how disappointed that made me. "Your left shoulder is dropping." I grabbed a clean shirt from the couch. "Very romantic." John stepped behind me. "Can I check it?" I nodded. His fingertips pressed lightly along my shoulder blade, then moved toward my upper back. Professional. Careful. Completely devastating. "You're compensating when you pull." His palm settled near my shoulder. "We'll lower the resistance tomorrow." I turned my head. "You noticed all that?" "My job is to notice." "Only your job?" His hand stayed still. For 1 second, his gaze dropped to my neck, following a bead of sweat toward my collarbone. Then he met my eyes again. "Right now, it has to be." He stepped away and handed me the shirt. John didn't look away. That would have been easier. Instead, he looked at me with the calm control of someone who knew exactly where the line was, while I stood there half-naked trying to remember how lungs worked. Later that evening, I went downstairs for water and heard Mom's voice from the kitchen. "He's doing better." "He is." John sounded tired but hopeful. "I just want to help him get back to who he was." I froze outside the doorway. Who he was. The thinner version. The happier version. The boy John had left behind and apparently still wanted returned. I went upstairs before they saw me. Under my mattress, the notebook waited. I opened it to a fresh page and wrote, "If I lose enough, maybe he'll finally recognize me." The next morning, I skipped breakfast and told John the first wasn't hungry. Skipping breakfast once was easy. Skipping lunch required lying. By the 3rd day, I had become surprisingly efficient at moving food around a plate, hiding protein bars in desk drawers, and claiming I had already eaten when nobody was looking. It would have been impressive if it weren't also incredibly stupid. John noticed before I expected him to. Of course he did. During resistance band rows, my vision blurred at the edges. I told myself it was sweat. Then the room tilted and my knees gave out. John crossed the space before I hit the floor, one arm locking around my waist while the other steadied my shoulder. "Sammy." His voice cut through the ringing in my ears. "Look at me." I tried. His face kept slipping in and out of focus. "I'm fine. You almost passed out." He lowered me onto the couch, then crouched in front of me. "What did you eat today?" "Food." His jaw tightened. "What food?" I looked away. That answered him. John stood so fast the coffee table rattled. "We had one rule." "We had several. Don't joke." The anger in his voice wasn't loud, but it made my chest burn. "I told you not to starve yourself." "I'm not starving." "Then tell me what you ate." Silence stretched between us. I hated the disappointment in his eyes, so I reached for the only weapon I had. "I'm trying to become the person you want back." John went still. "What?" "I heard you talking to Mom." My hands curled against my thighs. "You said you wanted me back to who I was." "Sam." "The old me. The thinner me. The version you actually remember." My voice cracked, which only made me angrier. "I know what I look like now. I know I'm not the kid you left." John stared at me like I had knocked the air from his lungs. Then he sat down, slower this time, and reached for the bottle of water on the table. "Drink." "I don't want." "Please." That word stopped me. I took the bottle. He waited until I swallowed, then rested his forearms on his knees. "When I said I wanted you back, I didn't mean your old body." His eyes held mine. "I meant the part of you that gets to choose what happens next." I laughed once, bitter and tired. "What if that person's gone?" "Then I'll meet the new one." The answer came without hesitation. John took my hand and pressed it against the center of his chest. His heartbeat was steady beneath my palm. "I'm not who I was 4 years ago either. Do you think I have to become that person again before I'm worth caring about?" I couldn't answer. He let my hand fall, went to the kitchen, and returned with a bowl of oatmeal. I took one bite and grimaced. "Are you helping me or punishing me?" "2 more bites before you're allowed to criticize." By the 4th, my hands had stopped shaking. John lifted the spoon when I was too tired to argue, feeding me with such quiet care that something inside me cracked open. I had spent a year treating my body like an enemy. He touched me like there was nothing here that needed an apology. When he stood to leave, panic rose before I could stop it. "John." He turned. I stared at the blanket over my knees. "What if I've loved someone for 4 years?" His expression changed, just slightly. I forced myself to look up. "What if it's you?" For several seconds, John didn't move. His face gave me nothing, which was worse than shock and somehow much worse than rejection. I wanted to take the words back, stuff them under the couch with the hidden protein bars, and pretend I had asked something normal, like whether he wanted coffee. Instead, I forced myself to keep going. "Not here." My voice sounded too small. "I need to tell you properly." That evening, I led him to the curb across from his old house. The front steps belonged to another family now, so we sat beneath a streetlight on the opposite side of the road, close enough to see the place where most of my important memories had happened. John settled beside me, leaving enough space that our knees didn't touch. It felt deliberate. "I liked you before you left," I began. "I was 15 and terrified that if I told you, you'd decide never to come back." His eyes lowered to his hands. I kept talking before courage could expire. Senior year, I started liking my lab partner, Kevin. Really liking him. He saved me a seat, remembered that I always bought apple juice instead of soda, and stayed after class when I was stressed about an assignment. I swallowed. "I thought maybe waiting for you meant holding on to something that might never happen. So I decided to give myself a chance with someone who was actually there." John's jaw shifted, but he stayed silent. After graduation, I asked Kevin if he wanted to go out with me. We were standing near the school parking lot, and I thought we were alone. My fingers tightened around the loose thread on my sleeve. The second he understood what I meant, his whole face changed. He stepped back like I had moved too close. John's hand curled against his knee. I kept going. Are you serious? He asked. Then he laughed once and looked around to make sure nobody thought we were together. No, absolutely not. I don't like guys. And even if I did, it wouldn't be you. My throat burned around the words. I tried to apologize, but that only made him angrier. He told me not to act like he had led me on and said it was disgusting that I had turned normal friendship into something else. John's expression hardened. Who said that to you? Kevin. I looked down. And we weren't alone. 2 people from our class were coming out of the building. One of them heard everything. By that night, someone had posted about it in a group chat. By the next morning, people were sending me screenshots, jokes, and messages asking how I could possibly think Kevin would want me. A photo from graduation started going around with captions about my weight and the way I looked. Kevin hadn't started the posts, but he did nothing to stop them. When someone tagged him, he replied that people should leave him out of my creepy fantasy. John's breathing changed beside me, slow and controlled. It wasn't just that he rejected me. It was the way he looked at me, like my feelings had made me dirty. After that, every time someone laughed near me, I thought it was about me. I stopped answering messages. I stopped leaving the house unless Mom forced me. Eating was the only thing that made my head quiet for a while. I finally looked at John. I know Kevin didn't cause everything. I had already been lonely for years. But what happened after graduation was the final shove. John's voice dropped. Sammy? Let me finish. I held his gaze. I really did like Kevin. But whatever I felt for him never erased this. I gestured helplessly between us. You came back, and suddenly I was 15 again, except heavier, sadder, and somehow even worse at talking. The corner of John's mouth almost moved. That part hasn't changed much. Thank you. Very supportive. The tiny laugh died quickly. I breathed in. I started losing weight because I wanted to be able to stand in front of you without feeling ashamed. I know that's not the healthiest reason. I'm working on it. My hands had started shaking, so I locked them together. But the thing I wanted to say back then is still true. John turned fully toward me. I held his gaze. I love you. The silence after that felt endless. Finally, John leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I'm not saying no. My heart stumbled. That sounds dangerously close to no. Sam. His attention settled fully on me, steady and painfully gentle. I care about you too much to let my answer become the only reason you keep going. I looked away. So I have to lose the rest first? No, the answer came sharply enough to pull my eyes back to him. I'm not waiting for a number on the scale. I'm waiting until this goal belongs to you instead of being the price you think you have to pay for me. My throat tightened. And how am I supposed to prove that? John exhaled slowly. Keep therapy. Keep building a life that doesn't collapse if I give you the wrong answer. Let this become something you chose for your health, not something you're doing to earn me. I forced a laugh that didn't sound convincing. You're the only person who could turn a confession into a psychological evaluation. The humor left his face. When I know you're choosing me freely, I'll give you an honest answer. It hurt, but not like rejection. More like being left in a doorway with no idea which side I belonged on. That night, unable to sleep, I passed the guest room and saw John pull a bundle of worn envelopes from his duffel bag. The top one read, "For Sammy, Year 1. Before I could see more, he slid them into the drawer and locked it. The next morning, I called him Coach instead of John. It was childish, passive-aggressive, and technically accurate, which made it perfect. He noticed by breakfast. Why are you calling me that? I measured half a cup of oats with unnecessary concentration. Professional boundaries. John leaned against the counter, arms folded. You confessed your love to me 12 hours ago. Exactly. We need boundaries. 15 minutes later, I was on the living room floor with both arms wrapped around his ankle. Coach, as your client, I'm formally requesting fewer lunges. He looked down at me without sympathy. Denied. This workplace is hostile. Stand up. Living with the man who had not rejected me but had also definitely not accepted me created a special kind of torture. John remained calm, attentive, and impossible to read. He still prepared breakfast, still waited outside my therapist's office, still asked before adjusting my form. The only difference was that every touch now carried the weight of everything we had admitted and everything he refused to answer. During one stretching session, he knelt beside me and guided my leg a few inches farther. His hand rested behind my knee, warm and steady. Too much. My voice came out embarrassingly thin. Not the stretch. His eyes lifted to mine. For one reckless second, neither of us moved. Then John released me and checked his watch. 30 seconds. I hated clocks. A few nights later, we fell asleep watching a movie on the couch. I woke before dawn with my cheek against his chest and his arm around my waist. John was still asleep, his thumb resting beneath the hem of my shirt like it had wandered there without permission from the rest of him. I stayed perfectly still. Not because I was enjoying it. Obviously, I was conducting important research. His breathing changed. His fingers brushed once against my side, then froze. John opened his eyes. We stared at each other from 6 inches away. "Morning," I whispered. His arm slowly loosened. "You were cold." A heroic explanation. He sat up too quickly and went to make coffee. That should have embarrassed me. Instead, it confirmed what I had started to suspect. John wasn't unaffected. He was controlled. Those were very different things. After that, I noticed everything. He still wore the bracelet I had made. He kept our old photograph beside his bed. He remembered my birthday, my coffee order, and that I liked the crispy pieces of chicken more than the white meat. One evening, while he portioned dinner, I finally asked, "Did you ever miss me?" His hands stopped over the cutting board. "Every day." The answer came so easily that it hurt. "Then why didn't you write?" John's gaze moved toward the hallway, toward the locked drawer in the guest room. "Who says I didn't?" Before I could push, he changed the subject and told me to eat. Over the next 5 months, therapy appointments, morning walks, carefully planned meals, and John's increasingly creative forms of torture became the rhythm of my life. What he had called a few weeks in our guest room quietly turned into months, and nobody in my family bothered pretending he was still temporary. Progress came in uneven pieces. Some weeks the scale moved, other weeks it didn't. I learned that a bad day did not erase a good month, and that one slice of pizza did not require a confession. By early fall, the scale showed I had lost 44 pounds. John checked the number twice, then looked at me with something dangerously close to pride. "Tomorrow, no workout." My stomach dropped. Did I do something wrong? No, he picked up his keys. "You reached 2/3 of your goal." And he tried to hide it, but a brief smile gave him away. "I'm taking you to collect part of your reward." John drove us across town without explaining anything, which gave my imagination plenty of time to become unhelpful. By the time he parked, I had considered a new pair of running shoes, a protein blender, and possible kidnapping. Then I looked through the windshield and recognized the house. It belonged to another family now, painted blue instead of white, but the old maple tree still leaned over the backyard fence. "How did you get permission to come here?" I unbuckled slowly. I asked. John climbed out carrying a small wooden box. "Apparently civilians respond well when you explain things politely. You've been living with me too long. Your standards are distorted." The current owners, Mr. and Mrs. Harris, had agreed to let us use the backyard for an hour. Mr. Harris had lived next door when John was 18. A retired Army staff sergeant, he had driven John to the recruiting office and helped him gather the documents he needed after his parents left. When John decided to sell the house, the Harrises bought it rather than let it pass to strangers. "He told me I could come back whenever I was ready," John explained as he opened the gate. "It just took me 4 years to believe him." The swing John built when he was 17 still hung from the maple, one rope newer than the other. I touched the weathered seat. "You fixed this 3 times because I kept jumping off it. You kept landing on your face." I was developing courage. John gave me a look. "You were developing medical bills." The joke faded when he placed the box in my hands. It wasn't heavy, but something inside shifted like paper. "This is the reward?" Part of it. I lifted the lid. A thick stack of envelopes lay inside, divided into 4 bundles. Each one carried a label in John's handwriting. For Sammy, Year 1, Year 2, Year 3, and Year 4. My fingers went cold. I opened the first. He had written about basic training, bad coffee, and missing the sound of me knocking on his kitchen window whenever I wanted snacks. The second said the barracks were full of people, but loneliness could still find him in a crowded room. In the third, he admitted he was afraid to come home and discover I no longer needed him. The final letter began with a single sentence. I want to go home, but I don't know whether home still wants me. I looked up. Why didn't you send these? John stared at the swing. You were 15 when I left. His thumb moved over the bracelet on his wrist. I knew you had a crush on me. Maybe I didn't understand every part of it, but I knew enough. My stomach tightened. And you felt nothing? John looked down at the worn cord. I cared about you more than I knew how to explain. But you were 15, Sammy. Whatever you felt, it was my responsibility not to encourage it or turn it into something you had to carry for 4 years. He finally looked at me. I wasn't going to give you a promise that might keep you from growing up and choosing your own life. I held the letters closer. Then why make me wait now? Pain crossed his face. Because when I came back, you were barely holding yourself together, and I became the center of everything too fast. Your meals, your appointments, your reason to leave the room. He stepped closer. I needed to know you could choose me without believing you owed me your recovery. And the wait was never the condition. John cupped my cheek, his palm warm against skin that suddenly felt too sensitive. What I felt when you were 15 was responsibility. What I feel now is different. His thumb brushed beneath my eye. I started falling for the man I got to know after you opened that door. The man who yelled at me over oatmeal, showed up to therapy even when he was scared, and kept choosing another day. I was already falling for you when that notebook only had 4 pounds written in it. I love you now, and the number has nothing to do with it. My eyes burned. That oatmeal was terrible. His mouth softened. Still dramatic. So what's your honest answer? His reply came without hesitation. I love you. The whole world should have done something impressive. Thunder, fireworks, a military flyover. Instead, there was only John waiting in front of me, careful even now. Can I kiss you? I grabbed the front of his shirt. You ask too slowly. His kiss was gentle at first, almost cautious, until I leaned closer and felt months of careful restraint give way to something warmer. When we separated, I rested my forehead against his. I still have 21 pounds left. We'll finish them together. You don't have 21 pounds to lose. John's arms tightened around my waist. No, just patience. Then he kissed me again, and for once I stopped counting. Dating John did not make training easier. That was my first major discovery as a man in love. My second was that kissing a fitness instructor gave him dangerous ideas about incentive programs. 1 set, 1 kiss. I proposed the morning after the backyard. John adjusted the resistance band around the stair rail. Fine. I completed 12 rows with more enthusiasm than I had shown for exercise in my entire life, then held out both arms. Payment. He stepped close, caught my chin, and kissed me just long enough to make my knees unreliable. When he pulled away, I smiled triumphantly. This system works. John checked his clipboard. Good. For more sets. I stared at him. You manipulated me. You proposed the terms. I was emotionally compromised. His mouth twitched. Start pulling. Apparently, my boyfriend was handsome, disciplined, and ethically flexible. The strange part was how little changed and how much changed at once. The harder adjustment was getting John to let me care for him. He could plan my meals, drive me to appointments, and notice a strained muscle from across the room. But the moment I asked whether he had slept badly, he became suddenly fascinated by the coffee maker. One evening, I found him sitting in the dark after a nightmare, his breathing too controlled to be calm. You don't have to tell me what happened, I murmured, lowering myself beside him. But you also don't get to pretend you're the only one allowed to help. John stared at his hands for a long moment. Then he leaned sideways until his shoulder touched mine. It wasn't a confession. It was smaller than that and somehow more important. That night, he let me be the steady one. Dating changed the edges of our routine, not its structure. The workout stayed demanding, but now John kissed my temple when he passed behind my chair and took my hand during evening walks. Sometimes I caught him watching me with the open warmth he had hidden for months, and every time, some old frightened part of me went quiet. He never praised me for becoming smaller. When I tried on new jeans and turned toward him, expecting a comment about my waist, John studied me for a moment. "You stand differently." I glanced at the mirror. Differently good or differently like I injured my spine? He moved behind me, hands settling lightly at my hips after I nodded permission. "Your shoulders aren't folding inward anymore." His eyes met mine in the reflection. "You're not trying to disappear." That compliment stayed with me longer than anything about pounds ever could. A few nights later, after a workout, John sat at the end of the couch with my calf across his thigh, working a knot from the muscle. His thumbs moved slowly, and I concentrated very hard on behaving like a mature adult instead of a Victorian woman experiencing ankles for the first time. "When did you start finding me attractive?" I blurted. John's hands paused. "That's direct. Therapy. Dangerous institution." I nudged his leg with my heel. "Answer." His gaze lifted. "The day you opened the door, I noticed you weren't a kid anymore. The attraction came later, once I got to know the man you'd become." I laughed. My hair looked like wildlife had nested in it. "I wasn't attracted to your haircut. I was over 240 pounds. His expression sharpened. "And," one word, no hesitation. Heat climbed into my face. John resumed the massage, gentler now. "Once the attraction was there, the problem wasn't whether I wanted you, Sammy. It was making sure your recovery never became about what I wanted." I leaned forward and kissed him before my emotions could become embarrassing. That night, an old dream dragged me back to graduation. The laughter, the phones, the certainty that everyone could see something shameful in me. I woke with my heart racing. John opened his door before I knocked twice. He didn't demand an explanation. He lifted the blanket and made room. I woke the next morning tucked against his chest. His arm locked around my waist even in sleep. For the first time, being held didn't feel like being rescued. Felt like being chosen. A week later, I propped my phone against a stack of books before our workout. John eyed it suspiciously. "What's that?" "I'm recording the last 21 pounds. "Why?" I pressed record and smiled at the screen. "For the memories." Then I announced the series name, My 65-Pound Journey. I thought I had to change before he could love me. John closed his eyes. "I sound like a prize at a county fair. A very difficult prize." Neither of us knew the first video was about to change everything. The first video reached 10,000 views before breakfast. By lunch, it had crossed 100,000, and by dinner my mother had sent it to every relative she had ever met, including a second cousin in Ohio who replied with 12 heart emojis and a deeply unsettling wedding gif. "This is your fault?" I told John, staring at the numbers on my phone. He stood at the counter cutting strawberries with the calm of a man whose face had not just been viewed by half the internet. "You named the series. You looked too competent. People find that suspiciously attractive. You spent 30 seconds lying on the floor. People appreciate honesty." The clip everyone shared showed me collapsing after mountain climbers and announcing, "I'm dead." John didn't even look up from his stopwatch. "Dead people don't ask for pizza." I sat upright immediately. "It's a miracle." Comments poured in about our banter, John's training tips, and the way he asked before touching me. Most were kind. Some people shared their own struggles with depression, weight, or being afraid to enter a gym. I read those twice. Then came the others. "He only wants him now that he's thinner." This whole thing is basically saying fat people have to change to deserve love. Someone found an old graduation photo and reposted it beside a screenshot from the video. The caption made my stomach drop. "Same guy, just less embarrassing now." I was back in the school parking lot before I could blink, hearing laughter behind me and pretending I didn't care. My thumb hovered over delete account. John found me sitting on the bedroom floor with my phone face down beside my knee. He didn't grab it. He didn't promise to destroy strangers on my behalf, though his expression suggested the army had trained him for several creative options. He sat across from me. "Do you want me to say something?" I shook my head. "I want them to stop. I can't control that." His hands rested open between us. "But I can stand next to you while you decide what you want to say." I looked at him. "What if I make it worse? Then we handle worse." The old version of me would have deleted everything and disappeared. Instead, I set up the phone. No filters. No music. John stayed off camera but close enough that his knee touched mine. "I need to clear something up," I began. "John didn't love me because I lost weight. He was the person sitting outside my locked door before I lost a single pound, treating me with care before either of us knew what our relationship would become." My voice shook, but I kept going. "Exercise helped me, but it did not cure my depression. I have professional support. I still have bad days. And losing weight did not make me worthy of love. It helped me reach health goals I chose with guidance." I glanced toward John. He saw me before I knew how to look at myself without cruelty. The response video traveled even farther than the first. This time, the comments filled with people saying they had scheduled therapy, taken their first short walk, or finally stepped inside a gym after years of fear. Over the next few weeks, our channel kept growing, and a local community center invited us to take part in a beginner wellness event. John helped the center's certified instructor demonstrate simple, low-impact movements while I talked about starting slowly, asking for help, and finding support that matched each person's needs. 23 people showed up. Several stayed near the door, coats still zipped, as if they needed to be ready to escape. I recognized that look. "You don't have to do everything today," I told them. "Walking in counts." By the end of the session, one of those people had moved from the doorway to a folding chair. It wasn't dramatic, but I knew how much distance that could represent. After everyone left, John stood in the quiet room, studying the worn dumbbells and mismatched exercise mats. "I used to think about opening a place like this." I leaned against the equipment cart. "A place with folding chairs and terrible fluorescent lighting?" His mouth shifted. "A place where people don't have to prove they belong before they walk in." I looked around the room again. For the first time, the idea didn't sound impossible. "Then why don't we build one?" 3 months after the community wellness event, the scale finally landed on the number my doctor and I had set months earlier. I stared at it, expecting the number to feel more dramatic than it did. The bathroom fan kept rattling as if nothing important had happened. John stood in the doorway holding 2 mugs of coffee. "How do you feel?" I stepped off the scale. "Lighter." His eyes dropped toward the number. "Not there." That made him smile. I had lost 65 pounds, but the important changes were harder to measure. I had gone back to school part-time. I could drive to therapy alone when I wanted to. Bad days still happened, but they no longer swallowed entire months. I could eat pizza without treating it like medicine or evidence in a criminal trial. Most mornings, I looked in the mirror and simply saw myself. Apparently, that counted as progress too. Mom cried over breakfast. Dad hugged me hard enough to threaten the medical progress we were celebrating. John waited until they left the room, then kissed my forehead. "You did it." I hooked my fingers into his belt loops and pulled him closer. "We did it." His expression shifted. "No, I helped. You did it." I wanted to argue, but therapy had made him annoyingly good at recognizing when I was giving away my own victories. "Fine. I did it." "Say it like you believe it." I lifted my chin. "I did it." "There he is." 2 days later, John drove me to a narrow brick building near the community college. The front windows were dusty, the floor needed work, and one ceiling tile looked personally offended by gravity. "What is this?" I followed him inside. "A possibility." John handed me a folder containing a rough business plan for a small training studio focused on beginners, safe movement, and people who felt unwelcome in traditional gyms. The proposed name on the first page was Homeground. "You were serious," I whispered, "about wanting a place like this?" He glanced around the empty room. Yeah, but I'm not signing anything without you. John planned to use part of the money he had saved during his 4 years in the army for the deposit. Before opening, he would also need to complete a civilian personal training certification along with CPR and AED training. The income from our growing video channel could help cover used equipment, insurance, and marketing, but only if I chose to invest it. John tapped the folder. This isn't a gift, Sammy. It's a question. What question? Do you want to build this with me? Over the next several weeks, we met with a small business advisor, compared insurance plans, toured the property twice, and learned that commercial leases contained more frightening language than any workout plan. John developed the training model while I designed the online platform, community program, and beginner onboarding process. After reviewing every cost and arguing over nearly every detail, we formed an LLC and signed an operating agreement that divided the business equally between us. Then we signed the commercial lease together. When the paperwork was finished, our names appeared side by side on the company documents. 50% his, 50% mine. For the first time, it didn't feel like John was handing me a future. It felt like we were building one together. On the afternoon we received the keys, I brought my old black notebook with me. Some part of me had always suspected John's mystery reward would involve emotional sabotage. I opened to the final page and handed it over. He read the words silently. I started because I wanted John to love me. I finished because I finally stopped hating myself. His jaw tightened. Sammy, don't cry. You'll damage your military reputation. I'm not crying. Your eyes are sweating. He laughed, then pulled me into his arms. After a moment, he placed 2 keys in my palm. One opens this place. The second was smaller. And that one. His thumb brushed across my knuckles. The apartment upstairs. We had already spent 3 weeks discussing the separate apartment lease, our share of the rent, chores, privacy, and what would happen if living above our workplace drove us both insane. John believed towels belonged on racks. I believed chairs had been invented for that purpose. Somehow, negotiations had survived. I closed my fingers around the key. So this is official? Both names on the lease. His expression softened. Equal rent. Equal decisions. Unequal tolerance for laundry on furniture. John stepped closer, his hand closing gently around mine. I'm asking if you want somewhere we both get to come home to. The invitation didn't feel impulsive or one-sided. It felt like a life we had discussed, negotiated, and chosen carefully. I looked down at the 2 keys in my palm, then back at him. Yeah, I whispered. I really do. We moved into the apartment the following weekend with 6 boxes, 1 borrowed couch, and completely different opinions about where the coffee maker belonged. By our first night, the bedroom was still crowded with unopened boxes, but the bed had sheets, which I considered excellent planning. John was checking the lock on the front door for the second time when I leaned against the bedroom frame. I think you forgot something. He glanced over. What? My reward. His eyebrows lifted. You got the letters and 2 sets of keys. Those were emotionally meaningful and legally complicated rewards. I crossed the room and hooked one finger into the front of his shirt. I'm asking for something less administrative. John went very still. Sammy, I know what I'm asking. I rose onto my toes and kissed him before courage could turn into another discussion. For half a second, he didn't move. Then his hands settled carefully at my waist, holding me without taking control. When I pulled back, his eyes searched mine. Is this because you think you earned me? No, I touched the bracelet around his wrist. It's because I want you, and I'm tired of acting like wanting something makes me weak. His expression softened, but his voice stayed serious. You can stop at any point. So can you. I guided him backward toward the bedroom. But if you start giving me a safety lecture, I'm deducting points from your performance review. A laugh escaped him, quiet and unsteady. You're nervous. Terrified. Kissed him again. Still sure. This time, John followed my lead. There was no scale, no finish line, and no version of myself I had to become first. He let me set the pace, checking every pause without making me feel fragile. until the distance between being desired and allowing myself to be desired finally disappeared. Later, I lay with my head on his chest beneath a blanket we had rescued from the wrong box. John traced slow circles against my back. Was that the reward you had in mind? I considered it. Part of it. His chest moved beneath my cheek as he laughed. There's more. Breakfast tomorrow. I lifted my head. And not oatmeal. He pulled me closer. You negotiate. Aggressively. That's why I own half a gym. The apartment was still full of boxes. Homeground was still only paperwork and an empty room downstairs. But that night I understood something I had spent years getting wrong. Being loved was not a prize for becoming better. It was something we chose to give each other freely. 18 months after John came home, Homeground opened on a rainy Saturday morning with 12 used machines, 20 folding chairs, and a front desk I had put together wrong twice before John quietly fixed it while I blamed the instructions. The sign above the entrance read, "You don't have to be ready. You just have to come in." John handled training programs and basic movement assessments. Whenever someone needed medical care or physical therapy, he referred them to licensed professionals. I handled social media, memberships, and the people who stood outside the glass pretending to check their phones because walking through the door felt too difficult. I knew that trick. I had invented it. You don't have to work out today, I told a nervous college kid during our first week. You can sit, drink water, and judge our music. He looked relieved. The playlist is pretty bad. I pointed toward John across the room. Military background. Limited cultural development. John heard me anyway. You're on towel duty tonight, Sammy. Abuse of authority. Living upstairs made work-life balance mostly theoretical. John woke before sunrise. I believed sunrise was a rumor spread by productive people. He handled the early shift while I made coffee, and he still kissed my forehead before heading downstairs like he was checking that I had stayed. We argued about protein bars, thermostat settings, and whether 3 pizza boxes counted as meal preparation. One is for tomorrow, I explained one night. John checked the clock. Tomorrow starts in 11 minutes. See? Planning. On Homeground's first anniversary, I overheard him telling a new member, "This place was Sammy's dream." The words bothered me all day. After closing, I found him wiping down equipment alone. Why do you keep giving me all the credit? John glanced up. Because you made this real. You imagined this place before you ever came home. I helped make it real, but it belongs to both of us. I set my old black notebook on the counter. You're allowed to want things too. His eyes dropped to the cover. I opened to the first page. My 65-pound journey to become someone he could love, then turned to the last. I used to think saying, "I love you" was the hardest part. It wasn't. My hands shook, but not from fear this time. The harder part is telling someone exactly what kind of life you want to build with them, and trusting them enough to let the answer be real. John went still. I stepped closer. I want mornings with you. I want to fight about playlists and remind you your oatmeal is still terrible. I want to open this place beside you every day. Not because you saved me. Not because I owe you anything. I took his hand. I love you because when I finally learned to stand on my own, you were still the person I wanted beside me. His eyes turned bright. Sammy? No fitness assessment this time. A laugh broke through his breath. His fingers closed around the old braided bracelet still circling his wrist. I didn't fall in love with a memory, Sammy. I fell in love after I came home and met the man you had become. His thumb moved across my knuckles. I love you for who you are, and knowing you choose this life from strength, not dependence, makes it mean even more. John's mouth curved. Can I kiss you? You still ask. I teased. I'll always ask. Then yes. Still yes. We kissed beneath the dim gym lights, our matching Homeground key tags resting side by side on the counter behind us. The next morning, John unlocked the front door while I crossed the gym and opened the blinds. Sunlight spread across the floor and reached the sign above the entrance. 2.5 years earlier, John had sat outside my bedroom and waited for me to open one door. Now we opened this one together every morning. I still had bad days. I still loved pizza. I still complained through most lunges. But when the light reached me, I no longer stepped back. I lifted the shade the rest of the way and let it in.